what was a billionaire's home become my office and my place of work.
This is Greg Stein, and in this podcast, Greg shares his incredible journey. He shares what it really took to overcome the most intense imposter syndrome imaginable. When he went from being a school teacher in one of London's lowest socioeconomic areas to suddenly managing a billionaire's family office. Greg also shares his best tips and tricks to help you conquer the imposter syndrome, even if you suddenly find yourself in one of the most high-pressure jobs on the planet. One of the previous guests on this podcast left a mystery question for you. But before we get to that, I have a few questions of my own. Imagine you're on a long elevator ride with someone and they ask you what you do as a coach. How would you describe the problem you solve and who your coaching is for?
I help high-achieving professionals and individuals in high-stake roles overcome stress, self-doubt, imposter syndrome and others to help them unlock their full potential. My coaching isn't just tailored to VIPs, leaders, and those navigating high-pressure environments, but that seems to be a category that I fell into. I remember that it really come around at the end of COVID. I think that the lockdowns had a huge effect on people in general. And obviously there was the great resignation and quiet quitting, where people left their jobs in droves, if you like, where people realised that there was more to life than working 60 hours a week. Of course, while for some it was like a really bad negative impact, it allowed me to turn a side hustle into a full-time job. And I think coaching on the up is the second largest growing business in the world, so it looks really prosperous going forward. But the biggest thing is that lots of men in particular left at the end of the lockdown. I remember one famous quote from Tim Cook, the guy who took over Apple. And he said that he felt like a fraud when he really took over Steve Jobs' role. And I think that's a great example of how imposter syndrome, or these guys that step into these high profile roles, maybe from the outside in look like they have the most perfect life and everything going for them. But there's actually behind the scenes something missing or something not quite right, or they're not quite as confident as they would like to be. And that's where someone like me steps in, keeps them accountable, sets goals, and helps them move forward.
In the pre-interview chat, you told me how you suddenly ended up managing a billionaire, and the imposter syndrome you've gone through there, the imposter syndrome you've suffered from. And in my opinion, it's safe to say that that was probably the biggest imposter syndrome anyone could ever have. But before we get to that, many people watching this podcast might not know what the term family office actually means, and what does the governor of a family office actually do? I've never heard of the term governor in that context.
I think it's better if I explain a story behind it and then how I fell into the role, if that makes sense. And I know I said fell in, but I think that's a good word to describe it. So when I was younger, I was desperate to be a sportsman. I put all my eggs in one basket, if you like, trying to be a professional athlete. Didn't quite work out. I had an injury. I had to retire early, and I didn't know what to do next. So teaching was like an obvious step. I loved being a sports teacher. And then I built my way up to being a head of department, and I was working in Hackney, which is obviously England's lowest socio-economic areas, but I loved it and absolutely thrived in it. But of course, living in the city was expensive. So I ended up mentoring, tutoring, coaching, personal training, nutrition advice on the side as a side hustle. And what I found that I was obviously in Kensington a lot, or, some real affluent areas of North London as well. And then one of them said, "Do you want a job?" And I said, "A job is what?" And he goes, "A governor." And I said, "What is this job?" And he said, "We want you to solve problems for us daily." So obviously a family where he had, a real successful business and lots of staff around him that would help him run his family and that would help him with his business, but helping him solve problems on the daily, as he was obviously an international living in London. Every day was different. Every day was exciting. Every day would get me to think on my feet, which was great because I think when I was younger, I had a real love for puzzles. And I think as I got older, I was able to put that love of puzzles into people. So working as a governor was helping these really high-functioning, successful people navigate daily life. But part of that, I become really good friends with them, almost felt like I was a part of the family. I'd go everywhere where they went, and it was a really rewarding job, but a job that completely took it out of me. So I was that guy who had imposter syndrome. I was that guy who had zero work-life balance and felt burnt out. So whenever clients come to me and they say they're feeling like this, or they have these worries or these concerns, I resonate. And I remember that I was that guy once. I was that guy who had those issues, and someone helped me see the light, if that makes sense. Someone helped me get through it.
Was this the billionaire's family office that
that you manage them?
Yeah, so the best way to say about a family office is we know them as private homes. In lots of places you have offices or whatever, but it was more in their home every day. So you're working for a family within their daily life every day, helping them solve problems. In terms of like a family office, that was literally their home.
You make it sound so low key, but we need to remember this was a home of a billionaire.
Of course, and that's where the imposter syndrome come in. But this is another thing as well, something that I realized. I used to believe that success was from perfectionism, but I realized that really it was about progress and adaptability. So I already had the experiences of adapting to high pressure situations, as a professional athlete, and as working in the lowest socioeconomic area in London, I'd already had the opportunity to tackle interesting problems, if that makes sense. So the skills I learned in that, I was able to put across to working in someone's home. Every day I would just try and be as sincere as possible to try and genuinely help them with their problems, So it sounds difficult, but it's so interesting to see that once you've done it, when the gloss rubs off quickly, you adapt really quickly to situations. And what was a billionaire's home become my office and my place of work.
Now, coaching often involves helping people break free from limiting beliefs or lies we tell ourselves. What's a lie you used to believe about success or confidence in high-stake roles?
I used to believe that confidence comes solely from perfection. I think that was probably me as an athlete, looking at Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods or people like this, But over time, I've learned it's about progress, adaptability, and owning your imperfections. That's a really interesting one because everyone's different. Everyone's got different strengths and weaknesses. And I remember, like a great insight for that is, research by Dr. Brown shown that embracing vulnerability fosters true confidence and connection. So unless you're there to really look into your vulnerability, really look into what, you might consider your weaknesses, then you are unable to make real massive steps forward in terms of confidence. Perfectionism is linked to anxiety and burnout. There's no doubt about it. So that for me was maybe the biggest lie, was perfectionism. But I've learned that the best way to create habits, if you like Atomic Habits is a fantastic book. But the greatest way to create habits is to set a goal, a real achievable goal, and that drives consistent behavior. That would be the biggest lie, that confidence comes from perfection.
What got you started on your coaching journey? Was there a specific moment in your career, perhaps while managing high-profile clients, that made you passionate about helping others overcome the imposter syndrome?
I think the real interest in looking at other people come from when I was a teacher. I remember when I was a teacher and I was in my young 20s, and I remember looking at the head teacher or the deputy heads thinking, how do they make such complex, stressful jobs look so easy? I think that was the first time that it planted a seed in my head. When I took these high profile roles, I was around lots of really interesting individuals. I've met the world's leading child psychologists, and I've met other coaches within my role. And it was interesting to see that even how the most accomplished individuals struggled with confidence and self-worth, and that really inspired me. So like I said, that interesting step from when I was a teacher to when I was a governor, looking at how high profile people managed their day. But I also had the craziest job in the world. It was a proper crazy job, and I struggled. So I was openly coached myself. Had a few issues or a few problems. Someone helped me. So that massively inspired me. So I was already coaching and doing a few things as a side hustle for years. But the guy who helped me really inspired me to really want to help others. He was the guy who made me think about looking at perfectionism a little bit different. And there's a quote I really like by Maya Angelou. Success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. So that was the planting of the seed for the coaching journey. I got really inspired by someone else to do it myself. And then obviously the lockdowns happen. And that's when the great resignation, that's when quiet quitting really set in. And that's what enabled me to spot a gap in the market and then to really go for it. And I haven't looked back since.
Tell me more. What happened then in lockdown from your perspective? How did things develop for you?
Believe it or not, my job didn't change too much. okay, but I was at home a lot more. So I remember I flew back from Palm Beach, from Florida, from the first time it happened. And I remember going to Tesco's to do my daily food shop and being, wow, there's people queuing outside of Tesco's. That was the biggest shock to me, that something wasn't quite right, that something's going to be different. And then obviously the impact of it is that people work from home. And I think that planted a seed moving forward for men in particular, that they realise that there's more to life than work. What happens after that was the implications, the idea of the great resignation, quiet quitting, and in particular, high profile CFO, CEO level, C-suite level men leaving their jobs after COVID. That's what it did for me. It was almost like a great awakening. And I think that's what we're starting to see now with Gen Z, for example, is they don't want to live the life of their parents. They want to live differently. They want a more rounded lifestyle. And I feel that seed was planted during lockdown.
I'm surprised to hear that I've heard about quiet quitting, and to me I always thought it was about the lower level roles, but you're saying no, it's even the high stake roles, they have experienced that as well.
Absolutely. So the stats for that are overwhelming. There was a study done in 2001 and a study done, straight after COVID, a few years after COVID. And it was the same study. It was a study that basically looked at C-suite, CFO level professionals and what their lifestyles were like. So how long they spent with their children, how long they worked, how much they exercised, but most importantly, how many of them quit their jobs. It was over a 40% difference from 2001 to 2021. The amount of people that left their jobs, especially in high level roles, was overwhelming. And the biggest indication of it was burnout, work-life balance.
What's a seemingly trivial decision in your career that ended up having a big impact on your confidence and on how you coach clients today?
I went to Bali on my honeymoon for 3 weeks. It was a real game changer for me, a real eye-opener, and actually a really amazing way to see how lots of other people live. I managed to become quite interested in yoga and lots of other holistic approaches to coaching, and obviously an interest from doing it as an activity on holiday sparked to me wanting to do it into coaching. I had a similar experience in Sri Lanka with breath work. I think breath work is going to be a massive development in terms of coaching. So an activity that I'd done for fun sparked a feeling in me that I thought I could also share with my clients, the idea of meditation, yoga, or supplementation to bring down their cortisol levels, to help them deal with stress better, to boost brain function. And that's something that I wouldn't have really known a lot about if I hadn't have had that experience in Bali and Sri Lanka.
If you could sum up your coaching philosophy in just a few words, especially around reframing confidence and managing the imposter syndrome, what would it be?
Before I tell you my own, there's a few that have influenced me. I remember Oscar Wilde saying, "Be yourself, everyone else is already taken." I remember hearing that in my early 20s and that really stuck with me. But there's two that I sort of stick by, almost like a mantra, almost like a positive affirmation that I tell myself every day. Authenticity breeds confidence. There are so many 20, 25-year-old life coaches out there, so many charlatans who haven't lived the life yet. And I think the biggest one for me is you can't lead others down a path if you haven't walked the path yourself. I think that's the most important one for me, is that you can have all the qualifications in the world, and I've gone and done them, but unless you've had the life experiences, then it's really difficult to help others.
What's a common misconception about confidence or imposter syndrome that you wish more high-achieving professionals understood?
I think many people believe that confidence is innate, that confidence is a God-given skill or something that you're born with. And I thought that for years, actually. I always remember, said the idea of when I was a teacher, looking at other people, especially the head teacher and the deputy heads, thinking, how do they make life look so easy? How are they so confident in such stressful situations, thinking that they were born to do it? But I think that confidence is a skill that anyone can develop with the right tools and mindset. When I was younger, I had a slight stammer. And I remember being really worried about that when I went into the teaching environment. But with persistence and goal setting and learning a few skills, you get over it. So I developed confidence. I wouldn't be here speaking to you now if I hadn't have had a few falls or a few issues when I was a teacher. And there's a really good psychology fact. Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset shows that you should view confidence as a skill that fosters resilience and adaptability. So Confidence is something that can be gained. It can be worked on. It can be improved on. And that's something with imposter syndrome as well. How I got over it was goal setting myself clear goals of what I wanted to achieve, thinking about where I wanted to be in a year's time. So yeah, I think that that's a common misconception about confidence, that you're born with it, that it's innate. But I really believe it's a skill that can be developed.
When you start working with a client who feels like an imposter, what are the biggest challenges you notice that they need to overcome first?
I always get them to look at their life as a movie. So the idea of being their own character in their life movie, thinking about what that character looks at every stage of that life movie. The Elton John biopic's a great example. It's a fantastic movie, but a different character plays him each stage. And that character has different characteristics, different skills, different things going on. So when they start to look at their life from the outside in, when they start to look at their life as a life movie, and they're managing that, and they're not looking at themselves, but looking at a character in the movie, I want them to recognize their accomplishments is valid. I want them to start looking at what they've achieved, what they've done from the outside in, and to validate it. I want them to shift their focus from external validation to internal growth. I want them to think about what they've done and to own it. And then I want to think about possible, obviously, things that they might not be so comfortable with, but to make sure that what their accomplishments, what their skills are, almost shine through. I've got a great example of this. I remember Michelle Obama, openly speaking about battling imposter syndrome, despite the incredible achievements that she's done for women, for example. But I remember that even the greatest, most high-profile people on the planet struggle with this. So for me, it's about recognizing their accomplishments, recognizing their strengths, and being able to shift their focus from external validation to internal growth.
Absolutely. You know what? That was a perfect segue to the next question, the mystery question left by one of the previous guests for you without knowing who you are and what you'll be talking about. So here's the mystery question. Imagine you are the main character in a film about your life, and this film about your life is premiering in a cinema. What would the audience be shouting at you? In some movies, the audience is shouting, "Don't open the door," or "He's behind you." What would the audience be shouting at your main character in your life?
I think the idea of "she's not behind you," I think would be a good answer. And I remember when I was rock bottom, I thought the world was going to end. I didn't see a future. And he told me just to look positively forward all the time. I remember openly telling my parents at that time that I'm never going to get married, that I'm never going to meet someone. But actually the guy's message to me become true. He said that, the dark days have become fewer and far between. And before you know it, the idea of light at the end of the tunnel is past you, because there's no light at the end of the tunnel because you're on a straight road. And I met my wife at a time when I wasn't expecting, but I was in a good state of mind. I was in a clear state of mind, if that makes sense. So when I was younger and I shut everyone out and I thought there was no future and I thought I'd never meet anyone, the idea of a crowd shouting "she's behind you," I think would make perfect sense, and that's a message that I tell to a lot of people as well, that when they're having their dark days, the future's always bright. You've always got to look forward. So if I hadn't have had that mindset, if I hadn't have had someone help me, then I wouldn't have got married, if that makes sense. So yeah, she's behind you, I'd have said, when I was shutting everyone out of my life and telling people that I was never going to meet anyone or move on past being a professional, if that makes sense.
What's the most unconventional piece of advice you've ever given or received about building confidence or overcoming self-doubt?
Actually, sometimes I tell them to embrace boredom. Okay, it's going to sound really different to what lots of coaches say. Lots of coaches that you see on Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter are all hype coaches, if you like, all ones trying to get the most out of people. But think about this, most people that are come to me are all about work-life balance, all about reducing burnout. So I tell them to embrace boredom, and there's a reason behind that, because sometimes the quiet, unexciting moments are where growth and clarity emerge. Research shows that boredom sparks creativity by allowing the brain to explore new ideas. When we look back at all the greatest music of our lifetime, how much of it's from the 60s, 70s and 80s and 90s? There was no Wi-Fi. There was no mobile phones. A lot more opportunity to be bored. And I think that's where some of that creativity really comes from. Boredom sparks creativity. So you've got to allow yourself opportunities to rest, opportunities to be quiet.
The next question is a fun one. If you were an animal, which animal would you be? Or put another way, what's your spirit animal when it comes to helping people overcome the imposter syndrome?
Okay, so an animal that I've always really sort of liked or felt a kinship to is a dolphin. You know, like dolphins always look like they're having so much fun. They're empathetic. They're in a pod. You know, they're empathetic to the other dolphins in the pod. They're always guiding others to navigate deeper waters with ease. But they're a dolphin in a sea of sharks and orcas and things like that, you know. So they're an intelligent animal going about their own business in dangerous waters. Dolphins are known for their teamwork, problem-solving skills, qualities essential in building confidence and overcoming self-doubt. But I like the idea of a dolphin being their own creature, being someone who's positive and forward-thinking in deeper waters where there's, you know, sharks and whales, much bigger, more dangerous animals than themselves.
What's a question you wish more clients asked you about managing high-stakes situation or battling the imposter syndrome?
There's a quote that I remember, and it's, "You can't pour from an empty cup. You need to take care of yourself first." A question that I wish more clients asked was, how can I make self-care a sustainable part of my success? If you can't look after yourself, how can you intend to look after someone else? So how can I make self-care a sustainable part of my success? Making time for yourself. And this is a really interesting part of my coaching process, is when these people come to me, these high achieving professionals, and say, "Greg, something's not right." You know, the first part of the process is reflection. 1 to 2 weeks, looking at their routines, what they eat, how they sleep, what supplements they're taking, how much time they spend with their children. It's amazing how many of these people don't feel complete or don't feel rounded, and you realize that they're spending more time exercising or more time in meetings than they are with their own children or doing their own hobbies. If you can't take care of yourself, and if you can't make aspects like that a priority, then you're never going to achieve your authentic self. One of the real tricks, life hacks to life in a business, is the happier you are, the more you believe in yourself, the more comfortable you are with the guy who looks back at you in the mirror, the greater that you'll deal with daily life. You'll make better informed decisions. So linking back to that idea of boredom, you know, it's along the same lines as that you've got to make time for yourself. You've got to make time for your own hobbies. So yeah, how can I make self-care a sustainable part of my process? Because I think in today's world, most people put work before anything else. And I think that that's almost got to change, isn't it? The idea of a 4-day working week. You know, people working from home. There's obviously a change on the horizon. Yeah, making self-care a part of your success.
For someone who feels out of place or struggles with imposter syndrome in a high-powered role, what's the first step you recommend them to help find their footing?
With any part of my coaching process, whether they come to me for 6 weeks or 6 months, the first part of it is always journaling. Journaling is important. It's not just keeping a diary. Keeping a diary is important as well, but journaling is acknowledging all your thoughts and feelings, you know? And the first thing I get them to do, if someone's struggling with imposter syndrome or struggling with confidence, is to start by listing and acknowledging your achievements as part of journaling. Seeing your wins in black and white is a powerful way to shift your mindset. Seeing your wins, seeing your accomplishments, seeing your strengths, but then you come back to it. You come back to it in a day or two. You need to give your brain a little time to comprehend it. And you need to be in a good state of mind to perceive that as well. In terms of psychology, journaling has been shown to improve self-esteem by helping individuals process emotions and reflect on accomplishments. So the idea of looking at your life from the outside in, going back to that concept of being a character in your life movie, journaling is really, really important. And then being open and honest about it, you know, sticking to working with a coach like me where there's accountability and we touch base on the journaling, you know, and we celebrate those achievements. But yeah, definitely journaling would be the first step for someone struggling with imposter syndrome or confidence.
Is there a book, a practice, or a habit that has been transformative for you or your clients in building confidence or dealing with self-doubt?
I feel like Atomic Habits was a fantastic read. You know, the idea of making habits autonomous, why you persevere, why, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo's playing football into his late 40s. But in terms of a book linked to that, I think the Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is a good guide for mindfulness and self-acceptance, if that makes sense. So yeah, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
What's one simple thing someone can start doing today to feel more comfortable and authentic in high-stake roles?
One simple thing to feel more authentic today is to reframe perfectionism. So there's a real good way that I can say this. I manage a football team, a junior football team on Sundays for fun. And when you win, you don't learn a lot. When you lose, you learn everything. So you only become a better team from learning. So I would say from reframing self-doubt to a sign of growth. So using things where you doubt yourself or things that maybe haven't gone right, and using that for growth. I think that's a good way to push boundaries as well. And there's a quote that I remember this from Reid Hoffman. If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. Coming back to the idea of you learn more from losing than winning. To reframe perfectionism and to see self-doubt as an opportunity for growth and development.
I'm always much, much more grateful for negative feedback if I can get some.
Yeah.
Because that helps me to grow. If you could teach only one lesson to all your clients about managing imposter syndrome, what would it be?
One thing that we do a lot is we always see our accomplishments in terms of work, in terms of what we've done in the office or the boardroom or the sports field, And I think that it's important to remember that your worth isn't always tied to your title or your accomplishments. It's who you are every day that counts, liking the person that looks back at you in the mirror. I think it'd be amazing to see some of these politicians or high profile actors or sportsmen, with all the news that's going on in the world at the moment, but how many of them are actually like the person who looks back at them in the mirror? I think that comes back to reframing perfectionism, that your worth isn't tied to your title or your accomplishments. Liking the person that looks back at you in the mirror.
What are you most excited about in your work right now?
For me, it's still helping professionals integrate holistic well-being and habits into their lives and thriving both personally and professionally. There's two really big programs that I've developed for this year. My high-ticket coaching business on LinkedIn, based mainly on LinkedIn stories, always been quite successful, based on, the work-life balance, the quiet quitting, the great resignation. And I called that the balance blueprint. But there's one thing that I've really noticed over the years, one thing that I've observed a lot is how we view cycles. So how we view July being the end of a cycle, August as a reflection period, and September is start of something new. And most importantly, how we view New Year's resolutions. I honestly think as well that 2024 wasn't the brightest of years. Birth rates are lower than they've ever been. The UK has the greatest amount of sick pay in the world, the greatest levels of unemployment also, records that we've never noticed. So I think for me, I wanted to create a product which would invigorate people going into 2025. So that's why I created the Peak Performance Project, to help people set goals, to keep them accountable and get them moving forward into 2025 out of 2024. But another thing that I've noticed as well is that the cost of living crisis here in the UK is massive. Coaching is expensive and it's not for everyone. And I get approached by lots of people who are really interested and they say, look, Greg, I simply can't afford it right now. So for years I had a newsletter and obviously I had my socials, which were free, but then I wanted to create something for everyone. So I created the Thrive Tribe, which is on Safe Space, which is an open coaching community. So then I feel that I've got lots of options for lots of different people. The more people that come to me looking for help, the more people that resonate with my message, then I feel that there's an opportunity for all of them now. That's what gets me up at 5 o'clock in the morning with clients, or taking sessions at 11, 12 o'clock at night. Is I generally enjoy this. I get a real buzz, if that makes sense, of helping people move forward.
If you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice to remember long after this episode, especially about tackling the imposter syndrome or embracing authentic confidence, what would it be?
My honest belief today is that we look at social media a lot, especially men. We see these unrealistic ideals, men with six packs, men driving Lamborghinis, men having these luxurious lifestyles, and we tend to see that as the norm, as the expected achievement level. My biggest advice would be is you don't need to become someone else to succeed. Confidence comes from embracing who you are. I remember Steve Jobs saying, don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your inner voice. So reframing perfectionism, being the character in your own life movie, not letting you being influenced by Instagram influencers, but becoming the person who you need to be moving forward. I think that only comes from reflection and setting your own goals.
The last question, your mystery question for the next guest. So, without knowing who will be the next guest on this podcast, what question would you want them to answer?
I would say this. If you were going to give your clients one small daily habit, one life hack to introduce into their life every day, what would it be?
I'm looking forward to get an answer to that question. Greg, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. I hope our listeners and viewers like and share this episode and join us next time on the Top Coaching Leaders podcast.